Hi, welcome to Naptime Nutrition. I'm Yaffi Lvova, registered dietitian and owner of Baby Bloom Nutrition, Test Kitchen, and Naptime Nutrition. And today I am joined again with the amazing Michael Klinkner, LCSW. And he joined me for a segment before, and here we are again talking about what to do when your child is being bullied. Thanks so much for joining me, Mike.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me back, Yaffi.
Well, we had such a great time last time. And I also want to tell people, so you should definitely go look for that session as well. But I also did a segment that's related to this one, what you can do when your child comes to you saying, I'm fat. And that was with another pediatric counselor. And so you can go back and look at that. But this is from a different angle. Today, we're talking about what to do when your child was being bullied. And I can tell you, I personally was bullied as a child. A lot of people were. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So where do we start with this? I mean, it's so much more complex than it was when we were kids. I mean, now you have the internet. There's so much more going on.
Oh my gosh, that's the hardest part. Like honestly, for like Gen Xers or millennials, what it means, like what bullying means, is so different than what it means for your kids. Like I didn't grow up with there being all of this potential cyberbullying. I didn't grow up with like all the social media and what it means. It's a whole new world, and so like our frame of reference around what it means to be bullied isn't the same as like a group of kids chanting like fight, fight, fight on the on the playground. This is subtle ways and 1,000 little things on Instagram and on Snapchat and on TikTok, and like whether or not like people like hit like on your thing or whether they don't hit like on your thing, and making sure like whether they like share your stuff or not share your stuff in an effort to like make you feel badly. It's a whole new world. It really honestly is.
That's really deep. I mean, that's on every level.
Yeah, it really honestly is. It's akin to, at this point, and so because like what lots of times like grades will form like a big group chat on like Snapchat or even in texting, and then on that they'll put something up that is meant to be derogatory towards somebody, and literally everybody in your grade will see it, and sometimes that's like 700-800 kids. That's the equivalent of like getting beaten up on stage during a pep rally back when I was in high school. Everybody sees it, everybody knows it. It's as humiliating as possibly can be. I don't have a frame of reference for that. Also, like I had a tough time for a lot of years of my life growing up. I know what it's like to be the target. I would never know what it's like to be at the target on social media. It's a whole new universe.
Yeah, it really is. And we were talking right before we started the segment about I was bullied as a kid. I posted on Facebook recently a number of anti-Semitic incidents that happened to me in elementary school. Not when I lived in New York. There was a lot of diversity, but when I moved to Scottsdale. And it got a lot of attention. I was also bullied for the size of my ears. Really, really. But it really doesn't compare to what goes on now, because that was between me and the kids who were bullying me and whoever was standing around, but it didn't involve the entire school or the entire grade.
Yeah, I think so. Let's take a moment. Let's define exactly what bullying is. And so that the term gets thrown around so much right now. And so even sometimes like in joking ways or like in like non-productive ways. And so bullying is an intentional tormenting in physical, verbal, or psychological ways. And that can be in person, that can be over the internet, that can just be voice, that can be through rumors, anything like that. It could be hitting or shoving or name calling or threats or mocking. And like sometimes these days, there's even like extorting money or taking things from people. And it's intentional, ongoing targeting of a specific person. And so there's lots of stuff that happens one time where someone's really mean to you, and awful and terrible and treats you horribly. Is that awful? Yes. Is it by definition bullying? No. And I think that's important because it's the like ongoing intentional targeting and tormenting of a certain person by another certain person or like a group of people. And so that's a little bit different than the whole like, hey, something awful happened to me today. I'm going to call it bullying because someone is really bad to me. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. That's okay. But as far as like what we're going to define it as today, there's like a very specific set of terms that's pretty important.
Right. It is important to know because we want to use the right terminology in order to find a proper resolution. And if we're using the wrong... That was professional. If we're using the wrong terminology, it's going to cause issues with getting that resolution that all
Yeah,
kids
absolutely.
deserve. Yeah. So what can parents do when their kid comes home or is home, and says that they're being targeted?
So the first thing a parent should do is validate the kid's experience. And it doesn't matter if it compares to your own experience. Like there's going to be lots of times with like tweens and teenagers where they're going to say like, I'm being bullied. And as parents, we're going to roll our eyes and be like, oh my gosh, someone didn't like your story and you're calling that bullying. Are you serious? But it's really important to note that kid is honestly experiencing those emotions. They are experiencing what's going on for them. So you just validate the heck out of it. Like, oh my gosh, kiddo, that would be so hard. I see where you're feeling that way. It's a big deal. I'm so sorry. Like, that's awful. After you validate, then you investigate. And so the investigation is a lot of like open-ended questions. Like, okay, hold on, explain to me what's going on. Explain to me what they did. Explain to me when it started and like what's going on recently. Because the problem is a lot of times, especially with like online cyber social media bullying, it's not like a big giant bomb that goes off the one time. It's these little subtle things over and over and over again that have to do with like somebody making a like one nasty comment on something, like one or two nasty comments, or like they'll tag someone and like do an eye roll thing, something like that. But over time it builds up and it ends up being a big deal. Now, I don't want to like claim that there aren't big things that happen online. I've experienced, like, I have a client right now who, while she was at school, this actually happened twice to her, where somebody had created an Instagram page that was essentially like, I'll use my name instead of hers. It'll be like, I hate Michael. They
Oh,
created an Instagram page that was I hate Michael and got everybody and sent it out in invites to everybody in their school. And like they go to a big, huge, giant local school in Chandler. And so that is hundreds and hundreds of kids that were now on an I hate Michael Instagram page where they would like then post like unflattering pictures that they took of me while at lunch. That's a big deal. That's hard. That's a giant bomb. That's obviously an easily bullying. Often though, it's much more subtle things that'll even like among like a small group where they'll share something on Snapchat or on their private Instagram or like things like that. They're like not quite so bad, not quite so awful, not so openly derogatory, but small. And so as a parent, that investigate part, you have to ask a lot of really open-ended questions so you can understand. Again, is it going to add up? Like to me, is it good? Like my older daughter's in junior high. When she describes to me like what's going on, am I going to roll my eyes and be like, do you even know what I dealt with today? Like, or what are you talking about? Like, what's so hard about that, right? But in her frame of reference, her point of view, that's as big and bad as it gets. She is honestly experiencing that. It is honestly awful. She is having those emotions. The investigation part is important because then like you're helping the kid pair together. Here's what happened. Here's what it means for me. This is why it's a big deal. And then as a parent, you get to understand your kid's frame of reference. So we have a validate. Go ahead.
oh, I think it's really important to get that context because it seems like there really is a lot of nuance with this and a lot of context. And I experienced that myself. We had a bullying incident last year with my boys on the bus, and immediately it looked like one thing, but then when you investigate and you see the whole situation, you really get the context and see where the pain was.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And also sometimes like a kid will lash back at their bullies, and then like people are going to be like, well, and no one's really at fault. What's the big deal? Like they have conflict with another. No, no, no. Like if I've been picked on for like 6 months and eventually I lash back, that's not the same thing. You can't call it even, Steven. That's not like, yeah, finally, I just like it's like kids being kids. Like no, no, no. I have felt powerless for 6 months rather, and I eventually tried to do something to take it back.
Yeah.
So when I say, so it's validate, investigate. The last part is regulate. This part ends up being really important. We try to hand the power and control back to the kid. So the regulate is like, okay, we know what's going on. We know the emotions. Hey, kiddo, what do you want to do about it? What are your options? How do you want to handle this? And so that might be like, you want to help the kid like weigh out like what are all the potential things they can do. It might be like, if they're still in school, like go to their teacher, go to their vice principal, go to their principal, go to a teacher they trust. It might be write an email to a teacher or something like that. It might be to block the kid on social media, but help them think through what all the options are, what are the pros and cons of each one of those options, and then let the kid execute their plan. It may not be, according to you, the most perfect plan, but that's not important. You're teaching your kid to defend and stand up for themselves in the face of a difficult situation. Even if it's not perfect and they're not going to get great results, so be it. It's okay. You don't need the perfect result. You need their perfect option and what they're trying to pull off. That's the most important thing. So to validate, investigate, then regulate.
I think that's so important to put it back on the child, because a lot of times when parents get overly involved and they get the school administration overly involved, I mean, there is certainly a place for the school administration, but if that's a little bit, if that steps on the child's autonomy and what the child
Yep.
would be capable of handling on their own, then they don't get that opportunity to build confidence that will take them so far in the rest of life. I mean, this is a terrible growth opportunity, but it is a growth opportunity.
You know, that's such a good point, because what happens is if your first move is like tell the principal, you're robbing the child of their ability to be able to handle anything on their own. Because anything that happens outside of school or off of school, the school isn't going to do anything. They can't, and they don't even want to have to deal with it. And so the kid's going to have to learn how to deal with this stuff. They're going to have to learn how to deal with rough kids, rough coaches, rough bosses, rough other people in their lives. This stinks, but it's a teaching opportunity that you get to show them like what to do and what's up.
Yeah. I think that's important, this whole empowering the child concept, and sometimes the school really does have to be involved, when it's younger kids who are not at a place where they can stand up for themselves, or if there's something serious and dangerous going on, you certainly want to involve people who would be able to help. But in all chance, if at all possible, empower your child. That's what I teach a lot of times with
Oh my
nutrition,
God,
is
yeah.
just empowering the child, is putting the power on the child so that they can navigate their way through life's obstacles. It's really difficult as a parent, especially me as a parent who was bullied, seeing my twins being bullied. I mean, and my mother was bullied. And now I'm just thinking like what she must have felt like when I was coming home with these stories. And now my kids come home with these stories. And man, that mama bear instinct is fierce.
You know, that's a really good point. And so like us as parents, we have to watch our own reactions to when our kids tell this stuff, because then like immediately, just like you said, like I'm jumping back to when that kid was being like bullying me, and like that group of kids had me in a corner back when I was in junior high, and then I am there again because they're saying the same stuff and doing the same things. And so like I want to act out of like what I wish I would have done back then. And so it'd be really easy for me to tell my kids like, punch that dude in the face this first chance you get, because I'm like, that's what I wish I would have done, right? Like, okay, not a great option though. And so we have to watch our own internal reactions. Like my heart's going to beat fast, my breathing is going to get weird, my stomach is going to drop whenever I hear it, and it's going to be partially because like, just like you said, like mama bears, it's like coming out like, you messed with my kid, roar, like you called her a what? No, 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 no. All right, I'm going to put you into tears. Sure, absolutely, I get it. I'm going to want to defend my kids too. And if you've had your own history, you're going to then not only operate out of like current stressors and wanting to defend your kids, let alone like what you wish would have happened back when it was going on for you. All of that is getting like dumped onto your kid in that moment that has nothing to do with them or nothing to do with that situation. It's a really important to notice our own reactions. And if I get angry when my kid's telling me this, I know I just have to like, I have to calm myself down in the moment. I have to not let my kids see the reaction, and I have to be like the most mature one in that. And it's like that's a big ask. That's legit. That's really hard. It's like I'm getting like punched right in the gut emotionally, but like okay, keep it together and help your kid. But
Yeah.
that is, you kind of have to in those moments.
Yeah. Are there any tricks to doing that?
Yeah. So generally speaking, I always tell parents like when like for any of us, when we notice our emotions like flaring up, it's okay to take a time out. It's okay to say to your kid like, "Whoa, I'm having a big reaction right now. Let's take 5 minutes and come back to this." And that's always an okay thing. In these situations, you have to be. It's a little bit trickier because your kid is coming to you for support, and you're like, "Yeah, I hear that you want support. I need 5 minutes and then come back to you." If like in these situations where they're like just like almost like only about the bullying stuff is the only time I would suggest like you just stay there, but maybe like, all right, hold on, kiddo, like hold on, let's go grab a bite to eat real fast. Let's walk to the fridge. Let's get, because we're gonna be here for a minute or two. Let's grab it some to eat, something to drink, so we can sit down and just be with each other. Like do something like weird, I'm like not like weird, but like do something to get yourself up and moving and distracted for a minute or two. Bring your kid with you under the guise of like, I'm hanging right here with you, but like, hey, we're gonna be here for like a half an hour. Let's grab a cookie and let's grab some milk and we're gonna sit here and like discuss this. But you're just sort of faking it until you can get your stuff settled down. Everything else is kind of like, it's okay to tell your kid, like, I need 5 minutes. I'm going to get myself regulated and then we're going to come back.
Yeah.
If your kid is coming to you like with their heart in their hand and be like, I need help right now, you can't walk away from that, but you can fake it for a couple minutes, no problem.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point because it's not only okay to show our kids that we're taking time to think. It's actually super important for modeling reasons, because if we want them to have that behavior where they can self-regulate, showing them that we need to take time to self-regulate and give ourselves a timeout, that's really beneficial. Because
Yeah.
there are words and then they're seeing something in action. And I can say that over the past year, I have been doing this co-mom homeschool co-op thing with a woman who I think is absolutely fantastic, and seeing her actually put these ideas in action with her children in mind has been amazing. So that same concept of modeling can be brought to the parent-child relationship, where the parent says, I need a timeout right now to think about this. And that shows the kid, hey, that's an option for me. I think that's
And it is,
fantastic.
oh my gosh, absolutely. And in those moments, it's a really great thing to tell your kid, oh my gosh, kiddo, this reminds me of just like when I was back in 6th grade, when I had a bunch of kids picked on me, and I know just what that feels like. I was there, and I know just the anger, and I know the sadness, and I know just how that feels for you. And it's really, really hard, kiddo. I was there, and I know just what that was like. It's really hard. I'm even kind of feeling it a little bit right now, just hearing your story. You can share that with your kid when they get that, like, you are there with them and you understand it because of your experience. That is absolutely invaluable moments, and it means your kid will come to you again next time, because that means vulnerability is okay, and it's okay in your family.
That's a really great point. So we were also talking about, there's a difference. We're about to hit summer break,
Mm.
and you wanted to talk about what happens during summer break. I mean, we used to get a break from the bullying. Summer break, you're not in school, you're not around the bully. And now social media has completely eliminated that break. And you're going to talk for a couple of minutes. I need to open my door because my cat is like screaming to get out. So, so take it. I
We'll
will be
solve you.
2 seconds.
Okay, so for those of us, like most of us here, like in America, we're coming towards the end of the school year if it hasn't happened already. For our international viewers, wherever you are, it's going to be a little bit different. But for here in America, like from coast to coast, just about everybody's off school at this point, which means like the access to the kids and the people most likely to do it is directly removed. You're not in class with them, you're not crossing by them, you're not having to deal with them, you're not like, they're not accusing you of stealing their boyfriend. But that doesn't mean things stop. Again, because everyone is so digitally connected at this point. And so like, and especially if your kids are involved in any like ongoing like club sports or club activities or like group activities or things like that, that's happening all summer long. There are sports all summer long. There are group activities all summer long. There are club sports, and sometimes, and some even high school stuff, where they'll get together and like they'll have weights, and you'll still meet at the high school and things like that. And so there's still plenty of opportunity. We can't just pretend like it's going to go away. It's going to show up probably differently though. It's more likely that it's going to show up in the form of digital media, like social media. It's going to show up in those places, either through group chats. Depending on the age of your kid, it's going to be Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok. When that's the case, what you're going to notice is this is harder because you're going to have to like read between the lines a little bit about what's going on for your kid. They're going to be acting differently. They're going to seem a little bit anxious. They may be on their social media more often. They might be off their social media more often. Either like they're going to try to get on it and take control, or they're going to avoid it like crazy. You may notice changes in their eating or on their sleep habits. And then they're not necessarily doing things that they might have enjoyed in the past. This is hard for the summer, and I want to note that, because like changes in eating habits and changes in sleeping habits are inherent as we transition to the summer. Like all the teenagers are going to sleep till noon. They're all going to like eat weird stuff like during the day. They're all going to like, all that stuff's going to happen anyway. but you're going to notice patterns throughout the summer then, because then it's different than the school patterns anyway. You got to keep an eye on that stuff. If you notice that they're moodier, they're more easily upset, they get angrier or irritable or like out of left field, or if they're avoiding lots of situations, like especially social situations. None of those in and of themselves is like, oh my gosh, my kid's getting bullied. But if you piece them all together, they're not like red lights, they're like yellow lights. And when you get 2 or 3 of them together, it's kind of like, what's going on with my kid? And then it's time to like sit down and have that talk. Also, I'm a big proponent of, you have got to be checking your kid's phone. You have got to be checking your kid's social media. I understand it is an invasion of privacy. I understand it is not fair to them. This is not a democracy. This is a parentocracy. It is in their best interest that you monitor those things. Brains are not developed until they're 25 at the earliest. They don't know how to handle so much of the stuff that's coming against them. You have to intervene. You can't just let them go to the wolves. I know, I get it. They're all going to push back. That's okay. And you get to say things like, I love you so much. I want to help you handle this in case something goes badly. This is what you would do about any other situation. Like if your kid was sad and down, or you saw your kid getting punched, you wouldn't be like, well, it's an invasion of privacy. I'm not going to go like find out what's going on. You'd go investigate. The only way to find out if your kid is getting punched over the internet is to be in their stuff, and you have to read those things. There really isn't any way around it. So you have to be there. You have to be a little nosy, give like with appropriate boundaries and things like that. But like you have to be in their stuff, and then also read their behaviors. That's when you're going to know that stuff is going on for your kids. That's when you start doing those open-ended questions and see what's going on for them, or see what's up.
It's so interesting. And I really like how you talked about the parentocracy as opposed to a democracy, because it seems like we try to take this theory of a democracy and put it on every area of our lives. And we try to give our kids as much autonomy as possible. But the truth is that we need to give our kids as much autonomy as is safe and appropriate for their developmental age. I mean, when we talk about nutrition, I don't say that intuitive eating is for kids. I say it's not for kids, because that's for adults. And as you mentioned, that prefrontal cortex, which is the brain area right behind the forehead, that's where all of our reasoning and thought and weeding through all of these thoughts happens. And yeah, that doesn't mature until later. And that's why division of responsibility is a better feeding method for kids. You establish those appropriate boundaries and give kids autonomy within those boundaries. And so that doesn't stop. And as they get older, until they're actually adults, like real adults not living in your house, at some point they won't need those boundaries anymore, but it'll be much further down the line than they want it to be.
Oh my gosh, Yaffi, I love that metaphor. That's like the eating thing is perfect, because then, so then the internet is like, not only are you giving your kid like access to like whatever junk food they want, and like, okay, we'll see if you eat it or not, but it's also the liquor aisle and the beer aisle and like the porn aisle, and then like all the drunk guys that are just hanging out and decide whether or not they're going to hit on your kid aisle too. Like that's the internet. And so like, you're right. It's like, have some healthy boundaries, allow the kids some amount of choices and some autonomy, but like you got to be on top of it. Because if I leave my 15-year-old in the aisle with beer, you know what's going to happen? They're going to drink beer. But if I'm there with them to monitor and be like, whoa, you're in the beer aisle, how do you want to handle this? That's parenting. That's teaching kids how to think through it. That's effective parenting. But you can't do that unless you're right there with them. You can't just you can't throw them in the grocery store and hope they come out sober.
Yeah, and I think the difference here is that they've gotten past the toddler stage. You're taking them out of the carrier, out of the baby carrier or the stroller, and you're holding their hand. So as you just mentioned, you're not going in and solving their problems for them by interacting with other people who are giving them crap. You're holding their hand and saying, how do you want to handle this? You're having a conversation with them as a way to empower them and make them feel like they're capable of handling it. And they know they have your hand right there.
Yes. And so like an easy first step of that too. So if you're an uninvolved, like if you're a parent who's like, just let your kid had like free access, which makes lots of sense. I get it. No worries. Of note too, is like, if you, especially like stereotypically, this is going to be boys who are going to play a lot of video games right now. And either whether or not they have chat on the video games or whether they're doing a Discord with all of their friends while playing the video games, you got to monitor that stuff too, because that can sometimes be the worst things that anyone can say to another human being is on all of that stuff. That said, the holding hand thing is exactly right on. It's, whoa, look what you came across. So like the easy way to like implement that in the beginning is, hey, what's the worst thing you've seen anybody say? Or like what kind of stuff ends up showing up like you've heard people talk about? Like, and so it's the whole like, talk about what's around you or like with your friends or what's happened to them. Like what's the weird stuff? What's the crazy stuff? Let's what like the, oh my gosh, a guy sent a picture of his what to your who, like that kind of thing. And so like, then you don't have to talk directly to the kid about their things. But if their friends are experiencing it and your kid will talk to you about it, they're experiencing it then too. And so you can say things like, oh my gosh, your friend had what sent to them? That's crazy. How would you have handled that? What would you have done? What would that have been like for you? Now you're having that conversation. You don't, and you're not digging into their stuff yet, but you're starting to get a frame of reference about how they handle those kind of things. That's a good way to ease into eventually like, hey kiddo, by the way, we turn our phones in at night now, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that's really smart. I mean, turning phones in at night is pretty smart anyway, because they're probably going to be in their bed and not sleeping, and it disrupts their sleep cycles and all that.
Nothing probably about that. They're going to do that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what the specific topic I had wanted to talk about was being bullied for weight. And this is a little bit different than others because not only is it coming from peers, but it's also coming from teachers who, I mean, studies have shown that students are often treated differently based on their size. It's also coming from doctors who might say, your child is overweight, needs to lose weight, put your child on a diet. It might be coming from the parents, it might be coming from grandparents. But the thing is that it could be coming from kids at school and so many other directions at once. It's coming from all of society. And so, what is the best way to counter that?
It's so tough because the weight thing, there's so much context to it, especially like in our culture here in America, what it means to be overweight or underweight or any of those things. And so, okay, as parents, the first thing is you have to check yourself. What are your attitudes and what are your thoughts about food, about your eating, about diets, about scales, things like that? You have to ask those questions about yourself first, because the worst case scenario is your kid is getting bullied at school and you are inadvertently reinforcing those messages at home. And you don't want to. I guarantee you don't want to shame your kids. You're not trying to make your kids feel so badly they don't like themselves. You may be trying to, like, if you make a comment here and there about weight, like maybe they'll wake up and like eat a little healthier. Okay, you better check what you're eating though. You better check like what you're doing about those things and what attitudes you're communicating. That's first steps. After that, if that's happening, this is so hard because like so much of what's going on, especially for kids and like as kids and like as they head into like tweens and teen years and like in that period of time, they're a hormonal wreck. And so like what's going on with their weight versus their height and how they look, they don't have a ton of control. So they can like, you can be this amazing parent that's like doing such good things nutritionally for them, and their body still is what it is.
Yeah.
There's genetic components, there's epigenetic components, there's hormonal components. It just is. And so again, in those moments for your kid, just validate what it's like for them. Validate it's outside of their control. It's your own. Like we were joking beforehand about like you said about your ears. My last name is Klinkner. That hasn't been ignored my whole life. Of course, I've been made fun of for that. There's just like so much of what gets bullying is about like what's beyond your control. It just is about the way you look or how the way your voice sounds or whether you have too many consonants in your last name or whether your ears are too big, they think, that kind of stuff. And so like for so many kids, it's a weight thing. And so when it's a weight thing and it's beyond their control, like it just stinks, kiddo. I'm so sorry. And then what's that like for you and how does it feel? From there, then in the regulation part, it's do you want to do anything? Is it worth it to you to try to take this on? And that's especially for like the older kids. We're talking like 13, 14 and above.
Right.
Where it's kind of like, okay, like is exercise important to you? Yeah. Do we want to do something about it? Do we want to do something for you? And it is so vitally important that both parents have those conversations with the kid, assuming both parents are involved. If they're not, you do the best you can, right? But whether it's male or female, both the mom and dad, whenever possible, having that conversation about what it's like ends up being a really, really, really big deal. For girls, whenever their dad talks to them about like, hey, body, rough, huh? Like, what's going on? What's that like for you? What's it feel like? And for the dad to say like, I love you no matter how you look, she won't forget that. It matters. And then the mom to have the conversation like, I know what it was like. It was hard. I remember battling that. I remember not liking my body. I remember eventually landing in an okay place, and to help her kid through that. And same thing for if it's a boy, like, yeah, kiddo, I was super skinny growing up. I got made fun of a lot, or like I was big, like when I was growing up, I got made fun of a lot. And like talking to your son about what that means, and for the mom to say like, I get it, I know, man, body image is tough. Those kids will remember those conversations from both parents and give them good frame of references from both their gender, and the opposite gender, and like what all that means. This is going to be super complicated, and we can't totally like dig down this rabbit hole. But if your kid is like non-binary or identifies as like what their not birth gender is, that's a whole other universe and a big giant conversation, and maybe a podcast for a longer day. But that's a quirky little world, that gets addressed, like very different set of conversations.
Yeah, and the truth is that since you brought that up, in that population where we have people who are exploring their gender or have decided that they're non-binary or that they're the opposite sex from what they were born, that particular population has an extremely high rate of body dissatisfaction and eating disorders. And there are people who specialize in that area, but it's very important to keep your head on with that. I mean, for example, if you have a child who was born female and has identified more as male and starts to go through puberty, that's really hard. That's really intense, because even if they are quote unquote healthy BMI, they're still starting to grow breasts. They're still starting to get pubic hair. And that can be very, very mentally challenging for a child who doesn't identify with their biological sex.
Yeah, as a blanket, as an over like broad blanket statement, if you have a kid who is like transgendered or like trying to figure that out and they're hitting puberty, they are in trauma every day. Go get professional help. There isn't any way around it. Like, as if I was born female, identify as male, and I start growing breast buds and start having pubic hair, that is so rough. It's such a big deal. They need extra support. Go plug them into a therapist. Go plug them into 1 in 10, or like whatever's like nearby, like a set of resources they needed.
Yeah, that's a really big point. And that's more common now as people are experimenting a little bit more with their identities. You know, as it's more accepted in society, it's getting experimented more, but that doesn't make it easy for the child who's doing the experimenting. So yeah, it can be difficult for a parent to validate that experience if they have no frame of reference for it as well. So that's really challenging. I imagine that any person who's going to help the child through that would also help guide the parents in parent-child interactions to make sure that it's as validating as possible.
Absolutely. And so like, to use this to jump off back to like your first question about like if it's about weight and things like that, also like those thoughts about like weight or body or being teased about your body or like looks and stuff like that, that is going to bring up your own stuff. Lots of us have had lots of body thoughts, lots of body image issues growing up and all along the way. As those comments come up, you're gonna feel it. You got to check yourself, fake it for a few minutes if you need to, and then be there for your kid as best you can, and then later that night take care of yourself in whatever ways you need to do to take care of yourself. It's going to kick all those things up for sure.
Yeah, well, that self-care point is really wonderful, because we do need to take care of ourselves in order to be strong for our kids. If you do have a child who is underweight or seems to be growing quickly, I do have separate segments of Naptime Nutrition on those specific issues.
Cool.
What to do if your child is underweight, and should you put your child on a diet? And the short answer to that is no. The American Academy of Pediatrics is not in favor of pediatric dieting for a lot of reasons. Some of them are physical, some of the reasons, because they're coming up on puberty and you don't want to damage that energy balance when they need those calories to go through puberty. And then some of it is mental. Like a lot of diet culture isolates health as physical. And so if a child is overweight, obviously the answer is you put them on a diet. But the thing is that's what diet culture tells you. When we get out of diet culture, we start to take a more comprehensive view of health. And it includes mental health, and it includes social health and spiritual health sometimes. And that's when you really get into, well, this might be better for my child's physical health, but it's going to really damage them mentally. Well, then that's not the way that you go. And a lot of times,
Right.
restrictive dieting that's meant towards weight loss, that's the angle it takes. It damages their confidence. It takes their trust away from their own bodies and puts it on a third party, and that really sets them up for a lifetime of yo-yo dieting, which in the end is also very damaging physically. And so in order to have ongoing sustainable health, you have to first see health as not only physical, and then you have to take a more proactive route to bolster your child's confidence. And just like we were talking about before, hold their hand and talk to them about, what do you want to do about this? And the truth is that with little kids, they don't exercise, they play.
Right.
And if we can just maintain that perspective, then the teenager maybe isn't exercising, quote unquote. They're going to a dance class. They're going to play racquetball. I guess teenagers don't really play racquetball. That was definitely a 40-year-old man type of reference.
I feel like the New Yorker and he's going to tell us to play handball next, right?
Handball. Just tell the kids to go outside and play handball. Brooklyn style, 1950s.
They're going to be running like craps games on the side of the house too, by the way, if that happens.
I was just going to make a joke about chess, but chess is fairly sedentary. Very important for mental health and mental strength, though. Chess is great.
Absolutely. No, but you bring up a really good point. So like the diet culture thing also, like a really big deal is then like when it's like, okay, so here's the body I have. The diet or looks and what you think about yourself is dependent on how other people see you. Good luck with that for the rest of their life. It's like you're just at meat because it's happening anyway with so many like filters and editing of photos and like all that stuff is happening anyway. Then it's like also like in real life, you got to really work on what you look on. Man, that's so much pressure and it's just so hard. And for parents, like if you want to go on a diet for yourself, okay, got it. I mean, there's a million questions, but like it's very rarely appropriate to share with your kid that like, hey, I'm going paleo because I need to drop 30 pounds. And so that's what I'm going to do. I don't like make your own meals and you can explain to your kids like, yeah, this is just the thing I'm trying for a little while. I think it's healthier or stuff like that. But like, don't put your kids on your diet. That's not okay. And very rarely is that ever going to be recommended. And most of the time you're doing psychological damage, just like you said.
Yeah, it's super important. And I always say that you should watch what you say about yourself and about others when there are little ears around. And guess what? There are always little ears around. Is it 10 p.m. and your kids are sleeping? Yeah. Somehow they're still going to absorb you saying that the neighbor gained so much weight and whatever. Just and don't get on a scale in front of your child. There is no reason to weigh yourself in front of your child, because chances are if you're weighing yourself, you're looking for some kind of specific result. And if you don't see what you wanted to see, you might have a reaction that you don't have time to stop before your child sees it.
Yep. Absolutely. And if they're going to get bullied, then if someone's going to make a comment to them at school, now you've provided the framework for that bullying to take root. If at home, it's kind of like, hey, listen, we got all different kind of bodies and they're all beautiful and they're all amazing for what they are. If someone at school makes a comment, it's then possible for your kid to be really resilient and say like, no way, I'm beautiful. Check me out. And like straight away. I've seen that lots of times too. But if at home you're shaming yourself and then your kid gets bullied at school about it, they're going to have a really, really hard time being resilient about things like that. They don't have a framework to make it okay.
Right. It's very interesting that you said that, because it's very easy to accidentally become your child's bully. So doing things that are subtle, like stepping on the scale or like making light food comments, could lay the groundwork, as you mentioned.
Sure.
Taking your child to Weight Watchers is definitely a more aggressive move where you in fact become your child's bully. And there are plenty of people who report having eating disorders after starting Weight Watchers at 10, 11, 12 years old. So it's very important to avoid sending negative messages, negative body messages to your kids.
Sure. And if your kid is not a healthy weight, one way or the other, you have to address those things, obviously. I mean, yes, love your kid. Do what's right for them physically and mentally. That's not the same thing as putting them on a diet. That's not the same thing as telling them they're on a diet. That's not the same thing as like shaming them into like what they should or shouldn't eat or what they could or can't eat.
Yeah.
Regulate those things, hold their hand through them, help them through those things, but not in a way that's gonna, because you're right, you're gonna end up being your kid's bully,
Right.
and they'll never forget.
It doesn't have to be overt changes either. I mean, let's just say we're going to start having a walk after dinner 3 times a week as a family because
Great example.
it's beautiful weather after dinner and it's a great thing
Yep.
to do before going to bed. Fantastic. And you're going to try, you know what? You're going to take your kids to the Asian market, assuming you're not Asian, because then, well, that's just your market. You're going to take them to the market and look at all these different vegetables that look different than the ones at the standard supermarket. And hey, do you want to pick out something that we can cook together and we can look up a recipe? Did you know that green beans at the Asian market are like 3 feet long? Kids find that fun. Okay, I find that fun. So, you know, you can experiment with different foods and experiment with different ways to move your body as a family in a positive way without making it about weight, without not only without saying that it's about weight, but without making it about weight. There are so many benefits to increasing your fruits and vegetables and increasing your physical activity. We don't need to make it about weight. There are so many other benefits anyway.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And on that note, about like if you go for a walk with your kid, you have a captured kid for like 35, 45 minutes where you get to like have conversations, bring up topics, be right there with them, let them talk about whatever they want to talk about. That stuff is valuable. And so like you're getting your kid moving and they're getting exercise, but you're never saying it's about exercise. You're never saying it's about weight, either yours or theirs. They're getting their needs met and you're getting this invaluable time with your kids. You don't ever have to bring up it's because like, hey, your BMI is too high. It can be like, listen, it's summertime, let's go. And also we're going to look up a lot of like meals that are like mostly like vegetables because they're so healthy for us. And I love it during this time of year. You don't have to say that we're going vegan because of like some health issues, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's always good to be a food explorer. And if you just take it from that angle and you all explore something together, that's fun. Go to a farmer's market, go to a you pick where you get to pick your own vegetables. That's so much fun. And that's the
Sure.
thing, it can be about fun. It is about fun. And I'll tell you, broccoli that's picked and cooked and eaten the same day, there's nothing like it. It's so delicious. It's
You're
like
such a food nerd. I love it.
you can taste the vitality in the broccoli. So it's a good thing to do anyway. It's a good thing for the taste, for the experience. You get outside, get some vitamin D, you know, it's like,
Yep.
and these are bonding experiences.
Be careful though. So if your kid comes to you and says like, "Hey, I'm getting bullied because people are calling me fat," right? And all of a sudden you're like, "Hey, let's start going for walks after dinner." Your kid's gonna read through it, and that's okay. And so you can talk about like I know what's going on, kiddo. I get this is like one of those things, and like I understand absolutely where you're coming from, but like, hey, we need to go for walks, and this is a great side effect. And quite frankly, I just want extra time with you. I'm going to steal these 30 minutes. We get to be together during that time. They'll find it valuable even if they see through it. But be careful. It's not going to like, don't be the whole like, oh my gosh, they called you too big. Cool. We start exercising tomorrow and we get all the vegetables and we're going to the Asian market. They're going to get what's going on. Be smart, take small little baby steps. Because the other part is for their kids, there's so much shame and there's so many big feelings there. If you're going to say like, all right, we're just cooking vegetables now, they'll resist that just because they know it's attached to this shame-based experience. And so it's like, oh, we're doing that because of the bad thing that got said about me. Therefore, it feels bad and I don't want it. And they'll resist the thing that's really good for them, but they're going to resist it because it makes them feel bad. This is a time for good parent manipulation. Just little tweaks all along the way. Change everything a couple of weeks. Add a new thing every now and again. Talk to your kid about like how much you like the walks with them and like picking the vegetables and doing the recipes. And you don't ever mention anything about like weight or exercise or anything like that.
Yeah, it just doesn't need to be talked about. And there are some proactive things you can do if your child says that they're being bullied or they're uncomfortable with their size. One of the wonderful experiences that I learned about was you can ask them to pick their favorite famous person. And I mean, ideally it's going to be someone who's an author or like someone who has accomplished something that brought kindness to the world, you know, something like that. But you can talk about like what do you like about this person? What do you respect about this person? And you just talk about it, and you can look up facts and even talk about where was this person born and learn something about it. And then you can bring it back to weight and say, hey, if this person gained or lost 10 or 20 pounds, would you have any different respect for them? No. Great. You know what? That's how people see you.
Sure. Absolutely. And so that's a great idea, because even if they pick someone who's like stereotypically a little bit like vapid or like shallow, like I'm going to overgeneralize. Let's say they pick a Kardashian, right? Just because like that's low hanging fruit, right? But even like so like when I do an exercise like that with a client and they pick a Kardashian, I can find quotes about like what they've said about bodies and whether or not it's okay. And I can talk about what they've said about like Caitlyn Jenner, and like what they think about like her body and what it means. And then you get to have those conversations from even the most like superficial or like whatever sort of people, whatever overgeneralization, but like they have also found something important to say somewhere along the way that I can use as a conversation jumping off point. And so even if it's like an athlete and even like I don't like or something like that, there's some quote, there's some experience along the way, there's something I can use that's going to be super helpful, just like you're talking about. And then then I can help broaden that all. Like, it's not about how you look, it's about who you are as a human being.
Yeah. There are some great books that parents can look into. I'm going to make a list. I think I need to make a list, but I'll start you off with Dr. Charlotte Markey, Markey. She wrote the book Body Image Book for Girls, and Body Image Book for Boys is either recently out or coming out soon. But it's all about this stuff. There are some books written for the parents to discuss with the kids, and some books directly for the kids, depending on the situation. And you'll want to make sure that's appropriate. You know, if the child is seeing a therapist, it might be good to run it by the therapist before giving it to the child. Sure. But there are some great resources out there to help parents with these really difficult conversations. But my favorite example of this whole respect thing, and you'll have to forgive my political reference. It's not taking sides on anything. It's just a recent political thing that happened. So don't worry, I'm not getting controversial. Okay. The first female African-American Asian vice president was sworn in by the first female Hispanic social justice or Supreme Court justice, right? And that's how they were introduced. Yep. Because it was a big deal, right? But we don't know what they weigh. Why didn't they list their weight? They should have listed their weight. I love that.
Nice job. That's a great angle. That's a nice job. I love that.
Because you've got stealing that. Yeah, steal it. You've got two really powerful women, and they were introduced by so many different identity markers, but not weight, and not dress size, and not height, and not even nail polish color. I mean, seriously, don't we all want to know what was on their nails? But the point is, the weight is irrelevant. It's about what's inside, and it does come back to the fact that health is not just physical. And by trying to change your child's weight, you're going for the physical and ignoring the mental aspect of it, and that's a really big problem that will be a problem for a long time for that child.
Yeah, very much so. Like it's really hard. Once the earlier it starts, the longer it's going to tend to last, because it just gets deeper roots. But also, if you catch it early, then it doesn't have a chance to take root. You can help like guide your kid out of it, or tag team with someone to help guide your kid through those things.
Yeah, I think that's.
But
really
also
cool.
like you also do have to believe those things yourself. You can't talk about like your body and how you're dissatisfied and how you're going to go and the Botox you're going to get and like the surgery you're going to get and the diet that you're on, and then be like, yeah, RBG was awesome. Nobody talked about her weight or her size. That's not, you can't do both. Again, it's so hard being a parent, but you do have to check your own attitudes and your own thoughts about those sort of things. It's a big deal.
It is really
don't
important.
Take your eye on. Yeah. I was just going to say real fast. Don't take your eye off of body image for boys these days. It's getting a little impossible. And again, it's a social media influence and ends up being a really big deal. Again, same sort of thing. The pressures that females have been up against for so long, with just the basics of like magazines and like ideal body image and things like that have sort of like mostly escaped males throughout the years. now we're literally everywhere. And so like what the ideal body image is and what it's looking like, you can't escape, like literally because of social media. And so like the influence of like, so like Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, good guy, a lot of great messages. His body is unattainable. And so like what it's like for like a growing boy to be like, I want to be like The Rock and like see what he looks like is like, what does that mean for me? And what does that mean for my body image? And what does that like say about me? Things like that. Though that sort of stuff is coming up all the time as there are just more and more influencers that are just putting out workouts and how they look that isn't realistic and actually isn't necessarily natural, so to speak.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had some conversations recently with prepubescent kids who really want to put on muscle. And it's a challenging conversation because I'm telling them your hormones just aren't at a place. Your body is not at a place where it can put on muscle like that. You're not going to be there until after puberty. And even after puberty, I mean, there are some bodies that are just unattainable for the most of the public, and The Rock is a good example. And I'm glad you brought up boys because a lot of times parents really focus on girls and they're used to this conversation with girls and they're not prepared for this to come up with boys, and maybe they don't see it and boys fall through the crack a lot. So it is important. And it's also important while we're talking about this to know that eating disorders don't just happen to people who are skinny. A lot of times
Yes.
people will look at someone's body size and say, I mean, they say like someone's big. Well, they can't be anorexic, they're big. That's not how anorexia works. That's not how bulimia
Right.
works. That's not how orthorexia works. That's not how any of that works. And when two people do the same unhealthy action, but one person is thin and one person is big, the thin person gets sent to an inpatient treatment center and the big person gets congratulated. And that's a
Absolutely.
terrible message to send.
And the eating disorders are on all binge eating disorder, bulimia, and anorexia are all on the rise with males and females. They are all on the rise with our kids
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons, and things like steroids and other like exogenous like hormone stuff are spiking like crazy for boys, especially if they're involved in sports because the pressure is so crazy. Let alone with the body image stuff. So younger and younger, there's a lot of really like good research that's coming out lately. There's a lot of 14-year-old boys that are starting steroids at that point due to pressures.
Yeah. There's also a horrifying condition called diabulimia. Have you heard that one?
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
have.
Manipulate your insulin that you're injecting. It's people who have diabetes who are taking insulin and they
Yep.
manipulate their insulin to manipulate their blood sugar to lose weight. And it's terrible. It's terrible.
Yeah, because they end up in the ER so much because they're doing it incorrectly, and they'll pass out either because they're too high or too low, or they're spiking it incorrectly, and then they're just at me. Yeah, you come home, your kid passed out.
Yeah, it's terrible. So these are all we gave you some great practical tips for ways to approach your kid when they come from bullying. And Mike, can you just repeat, when we first started this, you went through an acronym that we had
Sure.
3 steps. Can you just reiterate that?
It's VIR, so it's validate, investigate, and regulate. So validate is the, hey kiddo, whatever emotions you got going on, those are real, you're experiencing them. Investigate is, where's it coming from? A lot of open-ended questions without judgment. And then regulate, help your kids solve their own problem to the best of their abilities and let them solve it for themselves within reason.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let's close this out by telling everyone where they can find you. I know you have a whole lot of YouTube videos that are really helpful.
We do. So it's the name of my private practice is called Evolve Counseling and Behavioral Health. And so the Instagram is, I have a Michael Klinkner Counseling. The Facebook is also Michael Klinkner Counseling. The YouTube, though, is going to be Evolve Counseling. And then that's where my partner and I, Dr. Elizabeth Fedrick, we also have a podcast that covers, it's all parenting stuff. Like how to handle those stuff. We have like a couple video series about the VIR, validate, investigate, and regulate, and implementation, and a lot of that stuff along the way. So check it out. It's great information.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me again.
Yes, thank you.
I think you were the first guest to come back twice, but you were so great. I had to have you back again.
Win.
Yeah. So this has been really great. And I think it's really helpful to a lot of parents. I really appreciate you coming. And yeah, everyone check out where Michael is. He's got a whole lot of stuff and it's very helpful. We all need to feel more confident parenting and your resources really support that. So thank you for putting that out there.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for coming. Okay,
Thank
bye
you.
everyone. I'll see you on the other side.
Bye.
Okay, hang on.